for viewing on Acton Television. If anyone in the audience is making their own recording, please let us know now. All right, I see no indications of that. We will start with citizens' comment. Would any of our citizens like to make comments?
Yes, please.
Microphone is right there.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Or I have to turn this on. It was working. As you all know, what the town calls capital projects are non-recurring expenses. Mostly these are not things that would be depreciated. They're not physical things. Physical things like police cruisers are a minority of these items. Yearly capital projects fall mostly into two categories: upkeep and safety. The very few one-offs that don't fall into one of these categories tend to be small. Safety projects can be anything from a fire truck to a complete streets project. Upkeep is replacement of something that has reached end of life, like an HVAC system or a culvert. Some fall into both categories, like our previous generation public safety radio system. When we put together a list of projects for a given year, it's already been prioritized several times. The result is a list of the highest of the highest of the highest priorities. In FinCom parlance, these are the upkeep and safety items are needs, not wants. The breathing apparatus used by our firefighters has reached the end of its life. Obviously, this is essential. Our stormwater study said that we need to spend about $800,000 a year for a decade in order to keep up with bridge and culvert replacement. Yesterday's weather is just a reminder that we're just a superstorm away from possibly washing out a road. We have pedestrians, we have intersections in town where pedestrians have been hit, where crosswalks are dangerously too long, etc. I personally had a couple of friends call me within the past year with traffic incidents. One ended up in a hospital with a broken wrist. The other was scared out of her wits. The town hall's decades-old HVAC system is uneven throughout the building and is inefficient, overly hot in the winter and overly cold in the summer. Plus, we lost our backup generator in the spring, so we no longer have town hall systems in the event of a power failure. Sidewalks, it seems, are always on the chopping block, yet sidewalk projects are among the most popular with the public. Sidewalk and stormwater projects could be more efficiently handled if we invested a regular amount each year, which would make it easier to plan staffing and materials. Some have said that if we're having an override, this is not the time for capital projects. But the question I have is, if Prop 2.5 doesn't allow us to keep up with these essential projects normally, when is the right time? While the Select Board has not finalized the capital projects list, the amount that we're looking to spend is on par with what we had planned in the spring. I believe that now is not the time to cut these projects. Thank you.
You sure? Yeah, I guess it does sound like it's on. Members of the Finance Committee, good evening. I'm Mike Balulescu, and I live on Maple Street. I'm also a teacher at R.J. Gray and a Merriam parent, and as most of you know, I'm also the president of our teachers union. At your meeting last week, Jason Cole said more than a half dozen times that he does not believe an $11 million override in a single fiscal year will pass with the voters this spring. And I want to start by saying, believe it or not, I agree with Jason. I actually said pause for reaction in my notes.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let me be clear. I'm actually here tonight because I mostly disagree with Jason, but I do agree with him and Christy and Adam and probably all of you that the voters are unlikely to approve an override to cover the entire $11 million deficit in the town and the school budget without a single dollar of cuts from either entity. While I believe with my heart and soul that we should not lose any more good teachers, and the letter I sent you says as much, I'm also pragmatic enough to understand that an override is not so much a financial calculation as a political one. I understand that somewhere between what the school committee wants, what the select board wants, what the finance committee wants, and what everyone predicts the voter wants, compromise must be found. So in that sense, I agree that asking the voters for every last dollar without some uncomfortable budget adjustments is not realistic. However, what I believe is also unrealistic is the $4 million number that was discussed approvingly at your meeting last week. Listening to the committee speak with certainty about $4 million as the absolute cap was hard to hear, because I know with similar certainty that even with most of that $4 million going towards the schools, the cuts required to meet that number would be, without hyperbole, catastrophic to the mission of our public school system. Let me be clear, there is no single educator in our district who would say that we are currently funded and resourced at comfortable levels. We are living through one of the most challenging times in public education in recent memory, where all across the country we're seeing staff shortages, student mental health struggles, and the lingering effects of a worldwide pandemic. Acton and Boxborough have not been spared from these challenges. Most of the teachers I speak with are feeling more overwhelmed than ever before, trying to keep up with ever-changing and evolving needs of students and families, all in an environment where we have cut rather than added resources 2 years in a row. So I want you to consider that status quo and then try to imagine the impact of the ceiling you've proposed. With a projected $9.5 million budget deficit, of which I think Acton owns about $8 million, asking the district to cut an additional $5 million from an already austere budget would do permanent damage to the school system that is supposed to be the crown jewel of this community. $5 million in cuts means going well beyond anything a reasonable person would consider extra or nice to have. To get to $5 million, you start by cutting all the curriculum and instructional support in the district designed to help teachers in front of students all day keep up with best practices in the industry. You then cut the support staff in place to assist with supervision and safety, which just adds more to the plates of teachers and administrators already digging deep into their early mornings and late nights and weekends trying to meet the needs of their students. But all of that doesn't come close to getting below the $4 million cap you've suggested. After all those cuts, at that point, you're just reducing classroom teachers and increasing class size, making it harder and harder for teachers to meet the needs of their most vulnerable students. Inevitably, reducing elementary classrooms will require transferring some students to other schools, away from their friends and their community. Maybe, to blunt the impact of those transfers, you simply close Conant School, which is one of our smallest and neediest buildings, so that only one segment of our community is impacted. Inconveniently, Conant is also our highest performing school and serves the largest percentage of non-white families. All of this adds up to a school budget where we'll have removed most of the supports in place to try to make education more accessible, more effective, and more supportive for students and families. We'll have taken away much of what makes the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District an attractive, competitive, desirable public school system to begin with. I can appreciate that for those who don't work in the school district, this all might sound like fear-mongering. I would respectfully argue that I'm just telling the truth based on the numbers in front of me. If the Select Board were to move forward with only a $4 million override for next year, we would essentially be disenfranchising voters. We would essentially be disenfranchising voters and taking away any option to meaningfully preserve school funding off the table. We would leave the taxpayers with two flavors of disaster to choose from, neither one palatable and one simply more expensive than the other. I wouldn't be here tonight if I didn't think that you all have tremendous agency and power in shaping the future of our school system. I've worked in this district for 19 years, and I've lived in Acton for almost 10, and everyone knows how much the viewpoint of the Finance Committee matters. Success or failure at the ballot box in a town meeting depends on your blessing. Your opinion matters. Your voice matters. And I firmly believe that the decisions you make in the next few weeks will decide the fate of this override. I implore you, as a teacher and as a parent and as an impacted taxpayer, to dig deep into the town and school budgets and look carefully at what will be lost before drawing any lines in the sand about what you will or will not support. I want to end tonight by thanking you for your service to the town. I know full well that you are all volunteers who have taken up this mantle not for the glory or the popularity, certainly not the perks, but because you care deeply about responsible and prudent public service. I am grateful for that, and I'm grateful for how much time you've given and continue to give to make sure our town government does the right thing. It is in that spirit that I'm asking you to do the right thing and keep an open mind about the needs of our students and our families. Thank you, and apologies for the phone.
Thank you. All right. First agenda item is the preliminary budget presentation review and a discussion of what we want to do from that going forward into the budget workshops in January. I would like to start by talking about just a general feeling about the presentation that we got, and then go into that document that I give you all, and then we can discuss from there what else we want to ask for at the budget workshop. Who wants to kick us off on thoughts about the presentation? Roland.
I can go. So I thought the presentation was good, and there's been a lot of work done over the past several years. We get a lot more information than what we used to get, right? And I thought that was a good job. What I didn't see is I didn't see any discussion in that with stabilization. I mean, I saw that we said, oh, it's 1.4 million stabilization funds. We never mentioned of using any of that towards what they'd intended for. Last night's discussion was, hey, we have 15 open positions. Well, I think we need to know, from our standpoint, is what are those positions? What's the salary ranges? Are any of these positions critical? Police, fire, etc. And if they're really not, then we should have a hiring freeze. The other one was when you have these enterprise funds. One of them is the parking lot down at the South Acton train station. How much money is sitting in that? Can that money be used? So, and then the other one was, which we just kind of discussed before, was what's left in ARPA. What has been allocated but maybe hasn't been used or is not going to be used, and what can be reallocated. And those, I think, can help. I think that's the information that we kind of need to help as we go through this process. And so that's some of the information I'd like to see. There's 1.4 million in stabilization. That's kind of a big number, and if we used $500,000 of that, that can start to help whittle that down to get to use what it was intended.
Thank you. I think I've written that down, but if you could send the questions over,
Yeah.
that would be great. Who's up next? Dave.
Yeah, one excuse me. One takeaway I had was just it sounded like there's going to be a net 2 to 3 FTE adds in the fiscal 25 budget over the fiscal 24. And if you're looking at the different line items of salaries, it seems that X those, it's roughly a 4%, apples to apples FTE increase over FY24, and and that's sort of an all-in number. So there's.
Do you mean salary increase?
The salary increases, okay. Yeah, excluding overtime and some of the other items. So to Roland's point, I think the optics of hiring in an environment where we're dealing with a lot of challenges aren't necessarily the best. And then if there are a significant number of openings, I mean, it seems like an easier thing to tackle than a lot of the alternatives that are out there. And, one question would be is how long have these been open? To Roland's point, how critical are these positions, et cetera. So those numbers can get to be a little material after, a little while. And I don't think that's really doing a lot of permanent damage, and it's less draconian than a lot of alternatives. And then, I think this committee should talk about, just the land purchase and inventory. I've sort of beat this drum a little bit over the past. And I know it's not an FY25 solution to anything, but, I think we want to stay cognizant of FY26, that whatever the numbers end up being is that whatever that base is, if we're talking about FY26, it's likely a greater than 3% increase over the prior year, unless some real magic happens. And so, in between now and then, one thought would be to ask the select board to direct the town manager to compile a list and to prioritize a list of, I don't know what that is. I know that in the capital improvement plan, there's a very lengthy list of properties, and just, are all these essential? Should these be on the table? And those numbers can be pretty material pretty quickly as well. And I think it would, give us a bit of breathing room into FY26, which is all the focus is on the numbers as they are now. But clearly, this is going to be a challenge the following year. And so the more we get in front of it with some of these items, I think the better. And the two things that we're talking about, Roland and I, I don't think we necessarily should receive a lot of pushback on them. I think they're relatively easier asked relative to a lot of alternatives. And then just to pick on the fuel depot at the transfer station at the DPW area. I mean, 2.6 million. I hate to point that out, but it's a big number for in theory a temporary item. And my understanding is the existing tanks are at the end of their useful life. I've pushed on it a couple times, and it sounds like it's a go forward with the full deal of replacing all the tanks as is, even though in theory they've got a very finite life in front of them. So I don't have an answer to that one.
All right, who's up next?
I'll go. I stand behind what I said last night, which was that I definitely appreciated the town manager bringing both the an A budget and a B budget. I could be accused of being a little callous, but I looked at the B budget and didn't actually have a problem with it. So I definitely want to revisit that, because I don't actually see the urgency that he was trying to portray by showing just how terrible it would be if we didn't pass that budget. So that's kind of one of the first takeaways that I have from last night's meeting. Second thing about last night's meeting that I said last night that I'm going to reiterate now is I absolutely do not believe that this is the time for the town side to come forward with a 10% increase. I think one of the hardest things we're going to have to explain to the populace is how things were fine in May and are now 14% terrible in October. And I understand the health insurance trust changes, and I understand the unexpected increase in special education, but I realize I'm mixing budgets here. But at the end of the day, you should not surprise a taxpayer with a 10% increase. It's not warranted. And I think that if both entities continue to reach for a 10% increase, I very strongly fear that everybody will be left with nothing.
Anyone else?
I mean, I would just kind of reiterate what people have been saying, but the operating budget aside, subsidies are going up almost 13%. Capital borrowing is going up 78%, and capital from free cash projects is going up 222%. It's not the kind of budget you present when you're looking for an override.
Isha?
So I think as we are thinking through what the options are, something to consider may be a list of priorities from both the town and the schools as to what, sort of a prioritized list of what they think should be on the cutting list. Because if they don't tell us what their priorities are, then it will be left to other bodies to do that. So I think it's clear that it's unlikely that it'll the budgets as they stand or as they are presented will pass. The question is, how much will be cut from them to ask for an override? So I think that decision will be aided by some thoughtful decisions on prioritization.
Christine?
So I think for the last several years, the town and schools have both given us pretty slimmed down operating. And that despite their actionable budget shrinking year over year, as we predicted it would. And now I want to see what do we actually need from both parties to sustainably go forward. And if they've spent a couple of years hoping things would turn around and revenue would pick up, cutting, deferring maintenance, and now they're saying, you know what, going forward, we need this maintenance done. We need these people actually in these positions to maintain services. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to see in the budgets. And if we want services cut, I think we should be prepared to say which services we think should go. I don't think that should include anything that might be considered maintenance and upkeep that we're just going to have to address a year from now, 2 years from now, but we haven't built it into the revenue model when we did this reset. That's for schools and for town. I want to make sure we're not saying there's no going forward without cuts that we won't be able to justify without saying these are the services we no longer think we should fund. I mean, I think we need to be realistic that you can't just say don't backfill these positions. They've been deferring backfilling these positions to help try to keep us under that override number. Again, as their disposable, usable income bucket has shrunk at the same time. So they have been making cuts because their money that they've had access to has been cut as they've cut people on the school side, not hired and backfilled positions on the town side, deferred maintenance and upkeep on both sides. So do we want them to, is that the sustainable method forward? It's not. So what services are we asking them to cut? Because if it's not a sustainable, ongoing operating service that we're saying remove this, we don't need it anymore, then whatever slimmed down budget they give us is not long-term sustainable, no matter how much it costs. We need to know the real costs of running the town and the real cost of running the schools with the services we want to see. And then we need to take the services away to get the budget lower, if that's the end goal.
Right. Save that paragraph and say it right before we get to my point. Okay?
Sure.
That is the perfect segue into what I want to talk about.
Okay.
But I'm going to give Scott and Adam a chance, and Vlad, if he's interested, in a chance to talk first. You don't have to say something.
Well, I mean, I think people have already kind of spoken to what this is kind of my first go through with this, but when I saw the operating budget, last night, and then I heard how hard it was going to be to make any adjustments, but then there's 15 unfilled positions, 3 adds to staff, not knowing, the detail behind them. I mean, the private, companies, that's the first thing that goes. So I don't know what I don't know about those positions, but I see it, $1.2 million of potential savings, and probably of that 15, probably 800,000 was tied to those vacancies, and that's a lot of money that is just sitting there that we don't know if it's what the detail is behind it, but as it's been already mentioned, that's a less draconian approach to getting the budget lower, but to
Christine's point, we don't know how long those positions have been open. I know my company, they'll have positions open and then we never fill them, but they like just having the dollars there. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents. And then probably the only other thing that I heard last night that, I know, it just made me think was, I think John made a comment that if they held everything flat and in the budget, the 3% increase would cover the delta in the increase in the insurance cost. So, you know, not knowing what I don't know about how everything works, I looked at that and was like, well, why aren't we starting there? You know, why aren't we just saying, we'll just keep the cost, spend the same amount we spent this year and have the insurance cost be covered by the increase that's already built in. So, but there's a lot about this that I'm just getting up to speed on, so, but that's just my reaction.
Adam, did you want to say anything? No? What? Okay. If you look at the piece of paper I gave you, I have, since I've been doing this, found the budget presentation to be a little challenging. Because it takes you department by department, which isn't how I view the town. It's how the town works organizationally, but not kind of how I view what the town does. I want to know a lot of information that's across the various departments. So I wrote up, and this will be posted for everyone who doesn't have it, the basic budget driver questions I have. A lot of them apply to both the town and the school, dividing the budget in my mind up into people, the cost of doing business, any borrowing related changes that'll happen, and then other drivers that occur. So I wrote out the questions that I hope would drive a good conversation, specifically at this point focused on the town, of digging into all the various costs related to those elements so we could get a better understanding of the broader picture of what does it mean to have open positions. We get a list of FTEs per department and how many are going to be added, but can we really have an overall look of that? What does it cost to get each one of them in? What is the division of that across seasonal temporary employees versus the FTE full-time employee level people? Has there been a change in that? What sort of trajectory have various costs been on? What drivers do we project? Or do people project that maybe we've seen what has changed since COVID? We have an idea who've been doing this for long enough how the budget drivers run, but how much of that has changed, both since the previous override and since there was the COVID shift in being able to hire people, et cetera. And so I did that across as many categories as I could think of and came up with a whole bunch of questions. I feel no need for any of us to read through this now, but I'm wondering what you think about the idea of this, and if you like it, what you would like to see added to it. That can all come later. But in my business brain, this is how I would structure approaching the situation better. I think it also, as I say at the very beginning, it provides a benefit to have this discussion in public for us to understand not only the drivers for change, what's got us where we are, but also looking at any cost savings, realignments, reallocations that can happen, and having all of that discussion in a really public way, so whatever number gets reached, everyone in the public can be brought along to that process. Kind of a different type of analysis than we do in our general budget workshop presentations. Any thoughts, Scott?
Only because, again, I'm kind of getting used to this. I see. I like the concept. I think salary. I'd like to see a breakout between salary, overtime, and then benefits. Because when I was first looking through the financials, from last year's budget, the overtime section, I guess for me, was not as clear in trying to understand how that was working through. And I know overtime is needed, so it's not a question of not having overtime, but it's.
Yeah.
I think when I was looking at the budget last year, I was looking at overtime.
On the second page, there's a cost of overtime section,
Oh, there's cost of
to see
overtime?
if that,
Cost of overtime. Relative overtime. Right, but I think when I was looking at it, I think last year when I was looking at it, the actuals for overtime and the budget for overtime were not lined up.
they're in different places.
Yeah.
That's one I have in my private thing, is
Yeah.
trying to ask for how the
Yeah.
layperson would understand that.
Right.
Because there are things that are elsewhere in the
Right.
budget, but each department incurs.
Right. That's where I was struggling with.
Yes.
So I'm in agreement with that. Just getting more clarity around some of these things.
Anything else at a high level? I don't feel like you need to, I'm not expecting everyone to read in, right now, the question so much as, does this seem like a useful structure to ask for?
Yeah,
Roland?
I think probably when you put like exclude debt, what exclude debt is do we have out there right now? When does it retire? There are some, I know a couple of years ago, we bought, since I've been in town, we bought another fire truck. And I don't know what the bonding term was, or the rate. You know, is that rolling off next year? Is it this year, or has it already been retired?
Fire trucks typically aren't excluded debt.
No, I think he might mean the general fund borrowing, actually.
Yeah, general fund
Got it.
bonding. So maybe that's what, besides exclude debt, what about general fund
Yeah,
bonding?
no, I have it on there too.
Okay, so I think those are some of the items we should probably have some kind of insight into.
Yep.
So we know what we're looking at. If a lot's retiring at the end of, by June 30th of next year, might change some things. We don't know if we don't have insight into that.
I agree.
Did you do this all today, or have you been working on it?
I've been thinking about it for a while, and I wrote it up today.
Good. No, it's very complete.
Do you think this is helpful? I'm wondering if this is only helpful to my brain.
No, I think
I think it's helpful. Yeah.
So my inclination is to ask, to talk to the town manager about it, and have a presentation that covers this sort of more integrated level before we get into the usual department by department
Yeah.
that we have. I think in my mind, this is sort of an overview, and then we can get into kind of the more nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you all could look through this, come up with any questions that you would like to see, send them to me individually. I'll combine it and pass it on. And also, in reading through the budget, I have found some just individual line item questions that we traditionally have. So please also forward those on. The town manager has requested that we get him anything we can by January 1st. Sooner is better.
it wouldn't be Christmas without asking questions about the town budget.
Exactly. Just sit around the fire. And I had one more point. Hopefully I will remember it later. Okay. Thank you for the feedback on that. We can move on next to the AL. We discussed last night the January 10th and 11th are the dates for the budget workshop.
What are the dates?
The 10th and 11th, that's a Wednesday and a Thursday. And Dave, you said you can be there for Thursday?
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. Okay. I'm presuming those will both be at Town Hall, big room.
And we're gonna drop the Tuesday
Yes.
meeting before that?
Unless anyone has an urgent need, we will not meet on the Tuesday, our regularly scheduled FinCom time. All right. Let's move on to ALG. We met on Monday, which I, after long Mondays like this, forget was only yesterday. Jason did a good presentation of the presentation he had given to us last meeting. Was that last week? And we had, I'd say generally useful feedback. People didn't like our number. We made it clear that this was a number we had been asked for and not a number we necessarily liked either, but what we thought was a number that could stand a good chance of passing. And everyone else would like that number to be higher. So at this point, I think we all are just waiting for the budgets and having the discussions around it. there anything I missed?
No.
Let me see if there's any updates. The town, I think Mr. Manager Moretti might have mentioned it last night. They think they have found the money internally in the budget, can do it with freezing spending right now to cover this year's increase in HIT costs. So that's probably looking at not needing a special town meeting, fingers crossed.
With the release valve being that if we really do still need it, they can do a special appropriation as part of the regular town meeting on May 6th, because that still gives them a couple of months to run it out, to true up if they couldn't actually meet it.
That said, they have already fully used the DPW overtime budget, and we're not even into the winter storms yet, so we'll keep an eye on that. See what happens. The school has maintained the frozen budget and foresee it staying in place.
Was conversation about whether or not we wanted to have whether or not we wanted to have two separate overrides, one for one entity the first year and another one for the second entity the second year. We gave the guidance that we did not think that was a good idea, because whoever's first through the door is more likely to win, the second one through the door is more likely to lose. And that while even our proposal for this budget does not make anyone happy, at least it's got something for each side, so that it's an up off of zero, up off the mat number. It doesn't fit everyone, but it doesn't exclude anyone either. So that there was quite a bit of conversation about that. Apparently there was also some conversation about that last night at the select board meeting after we left from some of the emails I received today. So that does make me want to ask, if I may, because this is taking something from ALG and then running with it as a corollary. One of the things that we can do in Prop 2.5 is we can have, at the time of the ballot, we can say 4 million for fiscal year 25, yes or no, 2 million for fiscal year 26, yes or no, and 2 million for fiscal year 27 or later, or fiscal year 27. And that can be a multi-year override. And I'm asking for the committee's opinion on this. I think that's not necessarily a great idea, because I'm very afraid of someone just going, okay, we'll just take the first one and be done with it. I also like the idea of getting the full compounding interest effect of doing the entire override in 1 year. But what this does do, doing it that way, does address something that you have mentioned and something that you have mentioned, which is I don't want people to hear FinCom recommended an $8 million override. We're going to go with an $8 million override. We're going to spend it all in 1 year, because I absolutely do not want to get on board on that. So my question is, when we go back to ALG, do you want us to do a multi-year one ballot, save people from having to go to the ballot box year after year? Do you want us to have a multi-year override number, or do you want us to have a single number and enforce and do our very best to enforce budget discipline for the first year? Because there is that threat. There is the, I know Christine did not like me saying, do we trust him or not? But there is that danger that if we all get on board and public hears we're on board with an $8 million override, that someone would try and grab all $8 million in the first year. So I definitely like feedback. Yes, Adam.
Just for clarity on the ballot questions. So you're saying in order to do it in that gradiated model, each ballot question is its own question?
Each ballot question is its own question. And say you don't like the first year, but you like the third year, you can do that, and the dollar value would accrue to the levy in the fiscal year that's tied to the question on the ballot box.
It's unfortunate that it can't be a package that you're approving, the 4, the 2, and the 2, or whatever the...
Right. And that's unfortunate, because I would love to be able to do something along those lines. But then, as people are quick to remind us, we can't compel a future select board and a future school committee to do something. We can only compel the 1 year. Now, this would in a way end up compelling them, because there is no way to go above that $4 million in the first year. So in an ideal world, all three of them would pass, right? And this would compel more discipline in each individual given year. But I worry that if you put 3 on the ballot, multiple people are going to try and do a Goldilocks approach of, I don't want too big and I don't want too little, so I'm going to pick something that I think is just right. And so I worry about not getting as much as we feel we should be able to push through, because I don't think anybody feels that we're at the $4 million we're asking for, all the way, like, 4 million plus 2 plus 2. I don't think anyone feels that we're getting everything that they want. It still requires cuts on both sides. But do we want to trust the ALG process and keep the one large one and done? It's much easier to broadcast that than it is to say, well, we're doing this 4-2-2. So, what do you think?
Well, first, let me address the multiple ballot question. You're going to get somebody to check off for, yeah, I'll take the first one, but not the other 2. You may even get someone to say, I don't want the first one, I'll take the third. Even though that makes absolutely no sense. And the idea of having an override for one party 1 year and override for the other party the second year violates every law I ever understood about Acton politics, which was never do an override that doesn't benefit both parties, and never do 2 overrides in successive years. So I think that one's just a non-starter.
Funny, I think that's exactly what I said.
So, as far as how to handle it, no, I would go for whatever the number is that we want for the total override. You're going to have a town meeting and budget it anyway. So if you don't want people to spend it, you don't approve the budget, so that there's some untaxed levy capacity available. But you don't want to go back to the well too often, because there's such a thing as, it sounds strange to say it after 20 years, but it could be back soon, override fatigue. The more often you go back, the less likely you are to succeed.
Are you at all concerned that people are going to hear that we are on board with an $8 million override and don't listen to the line that was right there in the presentation that said agreeing to an override does not mean implicit or explicit agreement of any one given budget?
Am I concerned about it? No, I'm not.
Good.
We can certainly explain our position, but the fact of the matter is we had a multiple question override in 2005, I think, where we had an operating piece and we had a little capital piece and a big capital piece. And the operating piece passed, the little capital piece passed, and guess what? The big capital piece did not. So people are going to, they're going to vote with their wallets at some point. If you give them too many options, they're going to choose something less than the max.
So I feel like if the ALG is a consensus body, and in order to get all 3 parties of the body to agree to any override, if part of that stipulation was you can spend 4 in the first year, 2 in the second year, 2 in the third year, so long as that's binding, but what you're saying is you can't expect the next ALG to
Can't bind it.
Can't find it.
Although Jim pointed out, a lot of the people will be the same next year. It's not a jumble of brand new people in the room. So there is
Well, and I feel
some
like
degree
it's
of
easy
trust
for
available.
any one of the 3 parties to say, well, if you're not planning, if another party in the ALG process is not planning on abiding by that agreement, well, then we won't reach consensus this year, We're not going to agree to. I feel like it only takes 2 out of 3 to keep all 3 in line, but I guess it only takes 2 out of 3 to bring the whole process to the floor, doesn't it?
So to that end, do you think that we should only recommend a smaller number to ensure the first year, or are you willing to trust them? I'm willing to trust them. And you all know how loath I am to trust people.
I trust the process.
Okay.
But I also feel like I've seen instances or heard historical instances where one agreement or consensus was made about a budget item or a service, and then later, the next committee forgot about it, kind of situation. So I'm not sure.
Understood.
I think we also made it clear at the meeting that the 4 million is not our end number.
4 million was our end number for the first year's use of the override, because we still have not addressed free cash and any other activities. But we were, or at least I was, holding fast to the $4 million number because I want to keep the tax increase around 7%, no more than 7%, and I want to, which translates to about $1,000 a year. So the $4 million number is strictly the override number. I do believe that there are certainly a couple of items, especially on the school side, that are not eligible for override money because they're a cash flow issue. And so you'll get the money back later, and that's where we can use our free cash, and it can be backfilled later. But to just take the entire deficit and say we should apply override to it is not something I'm on board with.
What I recall hearing from our last meeting was a general idea that 4 million was a place to start, given what had been requested of us, but that there was a general discomfort with sticking to that number without having seen the actual budgets and the details. Am I misremembering?
You are not.
Well, go ahead, Christine.
Nope, that's good. Let's remind us that, yes, there was no vote on $4 million. There was a general, sense that it was a good starting point and that it was done with a lot of thought behind it, and that we needed to see the budget from the school.
I do have concern that it will be hard to get something more than that passed, which is, I think, a lot of how...
It's funny, because I have a concern. If I were Boxborough and I had a vote on a budget that was cut to the point that the budget will need to be cut if we only give the schools $3 million of an override, I would not vote for that. I would vote it no and hold it back because they're impacted by what we do to this whole school system. So if I were a resident of Boxborough and Acton were going to force cuts that deep on the school system, I would vote against it in my town so that it didn't pass. We have to go back and do it again. I don't know if that's realistic, but that would be me if I were a Boxborough resident and I were dealing with cuts that deep.
We'll see what happens. Along the lines of this, and what I had been meaning to talk in the earlier discussion, but I think we can shoehorn it into here, is some research that Steve did.
I was not nearly as productive as you in between last night and tonight. I did have another meeting. This massive spreadsheet in front of you was a little work I did by pulling information out the DOR, the Regional Local Services database. You have to manipulate the data a bit to get the spending per capita and the percent of total. But so what we're looking at is, out of the 351 communities, I picked this rather short list. Most of them you'll recognize as neighboring. communities. Bedford's in there, and because as many times as I've done this type of analysis, and I've done it a few times, trying to use Concord just screws up every comparison. They're just not like us over there. I did throw in Carlisle, so I surrounded Concord. And the other outlier is Winchester. And for some reason, every time I've done this, Winchester always comes up as a comparable community to Acton. Last time we did a serious one of this was the one that was done by the schools a few years ago, and Winchester was on that one too. And we had another set probably about 10 years ago in Winchester. So I was just used to having Winchester in my numbers, so I included them. Nothing magic about this selection. Like I said, I tried to stick pretty close to neighboring communities. As far as the average single-family tax bill goes, we rank fourth. Obviously higher than some and lower than some. As far as the income per capita, we rank fifth. Again, middle of the pack. As far as looking at the raw numbers and these are DOR buckets. I'm not entirely sure how they classify everything, but at least it's consistent. Looking down at the spending per capita for general government, we rank fourth. Again, middle of the pack. I may come back to that one in a second. And as far as the percent of our total spending, it ranks third in the group. Police, again, spending per capita, we rank fifth and third in percent of total spending. Fire, we rank eighth, which surprises me. And as far as a percent, we rank seventh. Again, we're at the bottom of the pile in terms of fire and EMS support, which I find surprising. But other public safety, I presume, is things like Board of Health and stuff like that. And that's right, ninth per capita and seventh on percent of total. Now here's where we, I think about 3 superintendents ago, I think it was Steve Mills said that your budgets represent your priorities. And in this case, I can see that coming through this analysis. In terms of spending per capita, we rank fourth in education, but in terms of percentage of our total spending, we rank first. This is just the AB assessment. So going back to general government, maybe Minuteman is hiding in that category, and that's why we may be a little higher. Public Works, and this may point to some of what we've been saying about not spending enough in this area. We rank ninth. Both in terms of how much we spend per capita and what percentage of our total spending goes into public works. Again, when we come to human services, we rank second in terms of spending per capita and first in terms of percentage of our total spending. Here's another priority. Fixed costs, not entirely sure what they mean, but I think it's mostly buildings and supported buildings, ninth and ninth. I have no idea what's in the intergovernmental expenditures. And in terms of debt service, again, we're way down the list. Eighth and eighth, which would lend one to believe that we have some room when compared to a peer group to borrow some more money. Too bad the rates are so high. I can certainly do some more digging around and come up with what they put in the buckets when we did this on the comparative community study for the schools. But a lot of the devil was in the details. Some towns have trash collection, sometimes don't. What bucket is that in?
Yeah.
But since the chair asked for metrics to be discussed, I thought I'd put at least a little time into digging into about the only database that I can say we can get consistent, clean numbers. Now, what we found looking at school spending and the DESI numbers was school accounting seems to have a lot of wiggle room into how you classify things in buckets. And so it took a lot of digging to get down to comparable data at that level. But I'm more than happy to keep trying to refine this if you think it's of any interest.
Roland?
I think it is. I mean, it kind of stack ranks us, right, with surrounding communities. So that's kind of how I look at it.
And if you got other ideas for communities, I can easily drop one out and add one in.
Mr. Noon, do you have a sense of what the bond ratings for all of these communities are relative to ours?
It wasn't on the sheet I was looking at, but there is one, so I can get that. I would think they're all pretty decent, but
What about putting in Stowe and getting rid of Winchester because they're right next door?
I can put Stowe in there.
They're a touching community, so to speak.
I was trying to get a couple of towns with the same kind of population that we have.
I mean, I just
you
thought
know.
it might be interested to see per capita type of thing.
But yeah, Stowe would be a possibility.
Do you know where, like, Council on Aging, Senior Center stuff, is that under Human Services?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I would think, yeah, social worker, veteran service officer, probably nursing service,
Yep.
That's something that none of these towns has. So
Where does transportation fall under that? You think that's under other expenses, or
probably,
how many other towns offer what we offer in that?
and this is why I said the devil is in the details.
Right, and that's one of my concerns, is that we have a transportation system that the bulk of the citizens don't use. And there's a lot of rides that are running around with nobody in the vehicle,
Yeah.
and we're paying for that.
Probably in general government, but
Steve, so this data is 2020 or 2021?
that's the wonderful thing about the DOR. They take the most recent data they have from whatever source. So single-family tax bill is 2023, population is 2021, and DOR income is 2020.
All right, so,
But the spending numbers are 2023, because that's the last year of actuals.
okay. All right. So, government, police, fire, education, public works, human resources, fixed costs, other expenses, culture and recreation, all reflect 2023 numbers. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
I like what you see about the allocation as percentage. I think it's what you were saying, is you can see where
Yeah,
People
where
money.
we want to spend our money.
I just wanted to add that in the government, it's state charges.
State charges. Oh,
Ve-
thank you.
ve-
I knew there was a good reason to have a professional on the committee.
Various state charges.
What do you mean by that?
It's like, can be like MBTA charges, like each community pays, like, a set of charges to the state. There is like state aid and like there is state charges, both called intergovernmental.
So we can't charge a T for going through Acton?
We missed that train.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mike hears it all the time, though.
And I think transportation is under human services.
Is it? Okay. You can help me with this.
Is DPW in some of these? Because some of
Public
these,
Works.
is that in Public
Yeah,
Works? Because
Public
some of
Works.
these towns, that could be why we're tanked, because it's not part of our, like, is it counted as, since it's a separate entity?
Don't understand your question.
So, I was thinking water. I don't know why I said
Not water.
DPW.
Yeah, okay.
I meant water. My bad. Sorry, it's been a long day. I meant water. Yeah. Since our water is separate,
Could be.
if it's included in some of these others, that might bring us farther down on spending.
Again, I'd have to, what we did on the comparable community study is we actually went to the town's websites and dug through their stuff.
Sounds like fun.
It was fun. And when we couldn't get all the way there, phone calls were made to try and understand where the numbers were buried.
Well, if you decide to add Wayland, let me know. I can help you out there.
I will. That's a good one. Well, that's Stone, I'll add Whalen.
It's not bad.
Oh, well, yeah.
Especially since you preached there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting comparison, right?
Because Christine mentioned water, that reminds me that the new water rates coming up are projected to increase the average single-family water bill by about $50 over the course of the year into next year. And I have a question for Mary Ann, if she can give a little thumbs up, thumbs down. Is that change reflected in next year's budget, the increase in rates?
The water district
Yeah.
one? I don't know.
Okay.
'Cause that just recently,
They haven't finalized their rates, I know, but we've been keeping an eye on it because it's a bill people get, and they did so much borrowing that there's gonna be. I'll include that in the emails to John.
okay.
Did the same thing last night. I need a new pen.
And I have asked the school for that also, whether they're keeping an eye on that.
Well, at least the new school got a bunch of water yesterday from the rain to flush the toilet, so
Sure that cistern's full.
sure it is.
Okay, does anyone have anything else on that topic? No? Okay. Point of view is on here in case something comes up. Does anyone have anything they want to talk about on that? Okay. We have no minutes right now. Any liaison reports?
The Health Insurance Working Group met for the first time a few hours ago. And basically that is the heads of all the unions and the superintendent, the town manager, and various staff, and me. And we also brought consultants from Gallagher. I went over the situation with the health insurance trust, answered questions, and then we went over how to approach changing things, whether through plan design of existing plans or changing the platform, for lack of a better word, that we use for insurance. In other words, going back to fully insured, going to a bigger group, going to the state group insurance commission, so there's a bunch of to-dos for our next meeting, which is the end of January, I believe.
January
Mike.
30th.
Yes, Mike and Mary Ann were there too. So, feel free to add anything I left out.
I think the importance is the timing, meaning that this group has to learn a lot very quickly and make wise decisions in a short period of time that affects every employee and every employee's family member. So it's an incumbent upon that group to do their homework.
No pressure.
No pressure. No.
Just kidding.
Any others? Is anyone watching the school committee meetings? Because we need to be doing that.
I'm sorry, I have not.
Okay. A few of you were assigned it. Can you work out amongst each other? So we can get a report every time, because these are, okay, which reminds me, January 4th, the school committee has invited us, we don't, I think, need to be there, but, to watch a consultant they have coming to discuss campaign finance. Because once this is set as a ballot item, at override, we are not allowed to use any public resources to push for it. That will violate campaign finance laws. I clearly do not understand the details fully, which is why they have invited a consultant to the school committee meeting. So, plan on watching that whenever you can. If you think you have questions ahead of time, let me know. I will go so I can represent us.
Well, that's certainly a change from any override campaign we ever had in the past.
Christy, can I ask before we start to wrap up, if we're going to kind of keep this 4 million number in mind, can I ask the committee to sort of come at some point with a sort of a list of services and personnel that, you know, looking through the budgets seems possibly superfluous, or, you know, maybe on the bubble? Or I think that if we're gonna stick to a number like that, we should have some idea of where we see that some things can fall off, so that we can fit under those numbers and be sustainable going forward.
I would love you to ask that again after we have seen the town budget.
We've
And
seen
then again after we've seen the
school budget, right? We've got
Well,
the
no,
town-
but after the budget workshop, when we've really
Sure.
have a better understanding of the budget.
Okay.
But yes, we should discuss that. Okay, any other liaison reports? Roland, where does the CPA stand?
I don't know.
Are you not that person?
I am, I just
Okay,
don't.
you just don't know, okay.
Yes, I know.
That's a good reason.
I mean, usually it's, right now, they're still getting applications in till usually around next week. And then they start to set, if they haven't got their applications in already, I don't know what the deadline was this year. And then they start setting their interview process, so to speak. To have the proponent bring in whatever they decide at that point. Then they deliberate from there. And mostly it's, does the application meet the guidelines of CPA funding? How much money do we have this year? How much is the applicant looking for, et cetera? And they go from there, and then they make their recommendations. And we schedule them to come in and see us.
Yeah.
To pitch their. What's the state match this year?
The state, they got first round, but there was nothing in the subsequent budget being allocated to CPA. The last 2 years, it was something like $50 million additional. That's not happening. So any other, of that, when they had the additional 50, every town got something that was in CPA. So we're not gonna get any additional revenues off that. Revenues from, land court, I wanna say, deeds, right?
Registry of deeds fees,
Registry of deeds is gonna be down.
Really?
There's been less transactions, so,
But they've been bigger numbers.
yeah, it's still a bigger number, but that deed fee goes to CPA, so
Yeah.
with less being happening, the numbers are gonna be lower. I remember sending it out a while back of what it was. I can double check that again. See what the CPA trust fund was, but
Yeah.
we only get round one. So, I mean, round 2 and 3 were small anyway, but
So after how many years of zero, should we start recommending that we not partake in this anymore? 3 years, 5 years?
Let's not start that argument right now.
Okay.
It'll never go to zero because we've used some of that to be as part of a bond.
well, yeah,
we
so.
we can
if-
vote out the surcharge, but
Correct, so if
the
you.
bond payments will continue.
If the town, and it went to, before the voters, and they said, yeah, we don't want this anymore. Whatever was borrowed against it, you know, they bonded a piece of property, the town is obligated to pay that money back.
Understood, but we don't have to keep adding it to 1.5%.
Right.
Correct.
So
Well, if you-
stops
if-
bleeding.
If you repeal the CPA, then, yeah, it was a general obligation bond to begin with, so it's town liability.
I understand.
So no matter what, it's.
We will
still-
discuss that when it comes up later.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Future meeting dates. I will see you all on the Wednesday, the 10th, presumably at Town Hall for the first part of the budget meeting. And then Thursday, the 11th, for the second part of the budget workshop. And then our meeting after that is Tuesday, the 23rd. ALG is meeting Monday, the 8th, before those budget workshop meetings. So I guess you'll hear about that on the 23rd.
10, 11, and 23.
Yeah.
Those
Um,
budget workshop starting at 7, or?
don't know.
Okay.
And I would like to say a special thank you to Isha, who is probably pretty happy to be ending her final meeting on this board. And, thank you for your time
Thank you.
with us.
No, I really appreciate it. It's been quite the journey serving on this committee. I've enjoyed working with every one of you. I've learned a lot, certainly from Mr. Noon here, but also from everyone else. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm sorry I'm leaving at this time. If I had it any other way, I probably wouldn't, but you know, that's kind of how things land. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And all the best in your new
Yes.
place.
Thank you so much. I
We wish you all the
appreciate
best, but we have one last piece of work for you to do, please.
it. Oh, you want me to do it too?
Why not? Take the honor.
Will do. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Do you have a
Second.
second? Wonderful. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. I'm not saying nay. I mean, say nay. Meeting adjourned.